You're listening to The Switch, a nonprofit HR podcast about all things talent management for social impact organizations. This episode is part of a special series with Lisa Brown Alexander, founder and CEO for Nonprofit HR. This special series focuses on all things organizational culture. Never miss an episode of The Switch. Visit us online at nonprofithr.com/The Switch. And now for some information about our conversation host. Driven to serve the often overlooked people management needs for the social impact sector, Lisa Brown Alexander set out to build a market where one didn't exist. She founded Nonprofit HR in 2000, the leading talent management firm in the country that works exclusively with the nonprofit sector. A serial entrepreneur, Lisa is also co-founder of Wellspring Manor and Spa, located in Prince George's County, Maryland. Lisa's goal is to ensure that every nonprofit HR engagement inspires social sector leaders to strengthen their most important asset, their people. Over the course of her career, Lisa has presented to hundreds of organizations, staff, and leadership teams, covering all things talent management for the social sector. Nonprofit HR has also been listed by Inc. 5000 as one of the nation's fastest growing companies. For this episode, Lisa will spend time with Ann Filipic, CEO for Share Our Strength. Over the past 20 years, Ann has led consequential civic, philanthropic, and political efforts that have helped transform the nation. Most recently, she served as assistant to the president and director of the White House Office of Management and Administration and the Office of Administration. In this role, Ann was responsible for building and maintaining the most diverse staff in White House history. Prior to joining the White House, Ann was the chief program officer at the Obama Foundation, where she developed global programs focused on civic engagement and leadership development. She also oversaw the integration of two major initiatives, My Brother's Keeper and the Girls Opportunity Alliance, into the Obama Foundation. And now, here's Lisa and Ann.
Good morning and welcome to The Switch, Nonprofit HR's podcast. And we are delighted to welcome you to the conversation this morning. Thanks so much for being with us.
Thanks for having me, Lisa. I'm thrilled to be here.
Wonderful. Well, let's start at the beginning. We know that you are the recently appointed CEO at Share Our Strength and that you came on board in September of 2022. Since then, tell us about your journey from then to now.
Absolutely. Maybe I'll start by telling you what really drew me to the organization, because I think it speaks to how I've been thinking about my early days and where we're headed. Share Our Strength's mission is to end hunger and poverty at home and abroad, and has a nearly 40-year history. Next year is actually the 40th anniversary. It was founded by siblings Billy and Debbie Shore, really with a belief that a diverse community of doers can change the world. I was really attracted to an organization that has this track record of great success. Also, an organization that has seen great growth and evolution in just the past several years. As I said, a nearly 40-year organization. The organization has grown significantly under the No Kid Hungry campaign, with a focus on addressing the barriers that prevent kids and their families from accessing the school and community meals that are available to them. Tremendous growth has happened both under sort of the last 10 years that campaign has taken off. And then also in the midst of the pandemic, we saw really significant growth. So I was excited by what I was walking into, and I was really drawn to an organization that, while all that is true, it's an organization at an inflection point, that we are excited about the success and proud of the success that we've seen. And as I was thinking about my next steps and the next role that I would take on, I wanted to be part of an organization that was sort of thinking about the societal moment in a way that's similar to how I am, which is, as we're sort of emerging from the pandemic and looking to tackle these issues of our times, yes, we need to double down on what's worked, but we need to be thinking bigger and bolder and more expansively about what it will really take to tackle these issues once and for all. And I was really attracted to what I felt in the interview process, which was an organization that said, we're really proud of what we've done, but we want to also think differently. We want to continue the success of the No Kid Hungry campaign. And we want to think about what are the root causes of hunger and poverty that put families in a position where they are dependent on these programs. I'd say we're at a point now that we're looking at what does it mean to end hunger and poverty today, tomorrow, and forever? Mm-hmm. And how does our program evolution and organizational evolution as a whole sort of meet that vision and that need? That doesn't answer the question you had, but I think
it's getting us there. That's all good.
And so understanding that sort of what I was walking into, and understanding the great strength and long history of this organization and the appetite and excitement for transformation. And I'd say every day I'm holding both of those truths together. And so how I really, when I started in September, I'd say I spent most of the first few months listening, coming in and sitting down with staff and hearing about their perspectives about the work that they do, what they're proud of, what frustrates them, what they would like to hold on to as the organization continues to evolve, what's top of their list of the things they want to see evolve. And so I spent a lot of time hearing from staff and recognizing that I came in with ideas, but I want to meld those ideas with the wisdom and the expertise that exists within the team. And then, we had our first all-staff retreat in a few years at the end of October. So that was a big moment for us.
As did we, together. Actually. We did the same thing.
I think a lot of organizations perhaps last fall. And so that was a big moment for us. And what I've really been focused on as I'm starting to maybe make some moves as the CEO is a focus on alignment around strategy, culture, and leadership. And I sort of think of those as sort of the three legs of the stool of sort of how we show up and how we fulfill our mission. That has been in the last couple months where I'm putting a lot of my focus and energy, first with the executive leadership team, alignment around those three pieces, and then looking to sort of bring that to the organization as a whole.
Wonderful. Very comprehensive answer. And you actually answered several questions in one response. So I love it. But let's step back for a moment if we could. What culture did you walk into, right? So what we spend our time talking about on the switch is really getting in the minds of CEOs and understanding what you described, the intersection between organizational mission, organizational culture, and talent. What was the culture of Share Our Strength? We're huge fans, by the way. I need to admit that I had a major CEO crush on Billy Shore for many years and followed him. He spoke at our conferences. So he's a friend of the firm. So I know you've walked into big shoes, but what culture did you walk into? Tell us about the kind of the inner vibe at Share Our Strength. We know about the brand and the external focus on ending child hunger, but tell us what's happening on the inside.
Absolutely. And I'm fortunate that Billy is still very involved. He's the, both founder and chairman of the board. I get to work with Billy and Debbie, who's also as founder and a member of our executive team. So I'm lucky to work hand in glove with them on a daily basis. I'd say the culture, a very special culture and an evolving culture. I was struck that in the conversations that I had early on, one-on-one or as a group, what do you love about Share Our Strength? What keeps you here? People would often say some version of, the mission is what brought me here and the people are who keep me here. And that there is I'd say it's an organization full of, as is often the case in mission-driven organizations, but I'd say good humans who are passionate about making a difference, who care deeply about their colleagues and feel camaraderie with them. And I'd say Share Our Strength has entrepreneurial spirit. That is, I think, part of what Billy and Debbie really brought as they set it up and held on to that moving forward. And maybe this is connected to, when you have two siblings as founders, I'd say there's a real feeling of family here, right? A real deep commitment to people in their sort of who they are as whole people, not just thinking of them as employees, right? And that's something that I was really struck by and perhaps have felt more than any other organization that I've been a part of is that sense of family. An organization that has historically, like I think a lot of organizations are thinking about how are we supporting and investing in our employees in their whole selves, and because that's how employees are showing up and expecting. I think Share Our Strength was really way ahead of the game in that regard. Investment in their employees, in really strong benefits. A little bit of an anecdote I tell is that when I was in the interview process and looking at the website and just learning about Share Our Strength, I read the executive team bios, and the executive team bios would, yes, talk about their work and their passion and their expertise, but they'd also talk about how they are world travelers or avid runners. It was very natural to include in their bio who they are outside of work. And so to me, that speaks to an organization of people that work hard, but also I think recognize that they can contribute more to the organization if they lead full lives outside of work, and the organization sees that in them. So that's what I walked into. And then I would say, there's also, throw into that, what a lot of organizations are facing is an organization that has moved into this hybrid environment. What started as an organization where everyone, was here in DC in a very small team, to an organization that not only has grown significantly now to nearly 300 staff, but over 60% of our staff are not based in DC, our satellite staff. So we are, in all the ways, sort of living this hybrid work environment and learning what it means to collaborate in that environment, to build camaraderie, to feel that sense of connection to an organization. And I would say we probably, like most organizations, are very much in the midst of navigating that.
Looking to integrate talent into your mission strategic plan? During annual strategic planning, organizations often overlook what talent is needed to meet their goals. Partner with Nonprofit HR for your organization's talent management needs. We offer HR outsourcing and project-based consulting, including strategy and advisory, retained search, total rewards, and equity, diversity, inclusion, and justice. We also offer customized trainings for your workforce. Join the many social impact organizations that have trusted Nonprofit HR to help them increase mission impact through their people. Visit nonprofithr.com.
What's been some of the greatest learnings from shifting from a location-centric organization to a dispersed workforce, particularly over the last 2 or 3 years? What's been the greatest takeaway from what you know?
I want to reiterate, I think we are living it. We are living the questions. Whenever I talk to other CEOs, this is the question I always want to talk to them about, is sort of, how are you experiencing it? From my perspective, I think maybe the ultimate question that we're living is what it looks like to foster connection, collaboration, both with employees, but also I'd say that connection to your organization that you're a part of. One of the things I've sensed, and I think, again, natural in a lot of organizations right now, speaks to my work of a focus on alignment around organizational-wide strategy, leadership, and culture, is that there's great pride in working for Share Our Strength. I think a lot of the connection that staff often feel is within their team, right? That's the team that they're collaborating with, working with, sort of in the trenches with. They have a shared strategy around that given initiative that they're focused on, but not always as much of that connection to the broader mission, right? And of course, the purpose of the initiative is directly tied to the mission. So it's not that, folks are just floating out there, right. But I do think there's work to do to sort of strengthen that sense of the broader connection to the broader mission, organization, and purpose. Mm-hmm. And I think that didn't just naturally come from, working in the same office. I don't mean to suggest that physical location was the thing that created that sense in organizations I've been a part of. I do think that opportunities to connect in person is a really important opportunity to build that connection. So I think part of what we're living through right now is sort of what are the opportunities available to us to build that connection. We do have a policy right now where DC-based staff are coming into the office a couple of days a week. Okay. And I think that there is opportunity that comes with that, but it is certainly not the full picture, right? So how do we foster that opportunity for in-person connection in the office that we have here, while also recognizing that the DC office culture is not, nor should it be, the culture of the organization as a whole. And so it's a little bit of sort of investing here and then investing in more broadly, and investing, culture and connection. But I think that a lesson is connection and collaboration still matters a lot. And in-person engagement can support that. And how we foster that in-person engagement looks a little different than it has historically. And that, like, yes, I think some of that can and should be. There's an opportunity for those that are based in the same geographic place to connect on a weekly basis in an office. But that can't be it alone, right? So I mentioned the all staff convening. Our teams are having a greater frequency of small group convenings. And I expect that our work in the future will continue to evolve in that way, that we are creating more space for those kind of small team and large team in purposeful engagements.
Yeah. What you're really talking about, in a sense, is the diverse way in which people can and need and want to work, right? So some people really connect to others through in-person engagement. Others are perfectly fine working remotely and prefer that. And then you've got the folks who want to be able to have the opportunity to both connect in person and work remotely. And so it's really a function of diverse work needs. When we talk about diversity on another spectrum, if you could speak to the work that Share Our Strength has been doing or will be doing in the near future around diversity, equity, and inclusion from an internal perspective. We know that Share Our Strength serves a diverse community of children and parents and families and even support organizations. But talk to us about your internal efforts. What does that look like? What challenges have you faced? Specifically, are you seeing any measure of fatigue around advancing diversity, equity, and inclusion initiatives?
And a contextual note, so as we mentioned, I started in September, and in October, I hired our Senior Vice President for Equity, Diversity, and Inclusion, Nefertari Sakut. She started in December, right before the end of the
She's even more new than you are.
Yes, we've been jumping into this together, and should be clear that walked into a great commitment to equity, diversity, and inclusion, and a lot of action and activity that has been happening. I'd say, there are many examples I could point to, in particular on the initiative level. So for example, how our programmatic team has completely rehauled a framework they're using to center equity in our grant making, right? And what does that look like? That is I think a really powerful example of a need was identified, a commitment was made, and action has been taken. What I will also say is, I think Nefertari and I both feel that there is a lot to be proud of here. What I think, maybe this is similar to what I was just saying, that maybe the bulk of the activity has happened within teams, within initiatives. And what we're hungry to do is build upon that work and a commitment that has been made, and a great amount of training and engagement from the executive team level to really move into an organizational-wide EDI, equity, diversity, and inclusion strategy. The first step we're taking in partnership with you all is an assessment, an organization-wide assessment, really just getting a full sense of all that has occurred. Nefertari and I are both very sensitive about not suggesting that, this is a sort of a blank slate exercise, or that the team hasn't been deeply committed to this. And as new leaders, we need to understand what's been done so that we can continue to move the work forward and support that work, especially at the leadership organization-wide level, and create that framework that all the other work fits within, and to ensure that we are, as I think about it, sort of all on one big ship rowing in the same direction as we really work to fulfill our mission and live our values and center equity, diversity, and inclusion in that. So I would say the question of, is there fatigue? I think staff are hungry for, as we all feel as we do this work, to ensure that things like trainings and education turns into practice, right? Turns into implementation. And of course, as we all know, that can get tricky at times. But to me, that is what our work is to I sometimes talk about this, especially as a white leader working in equity, diversity, and inclusion, is that part of our job is to be comfortable sitting in discomfort at times, and sort of bringing these principles to really sort of pulling out our magnifying glass and saying, And how are we living these principles? And in what ways perhaps are we not? And creating the space to I think apply the lessons that the trainings that we've received to ensure that it applies to all aspects of our organization. So again, I'd say there's plenty of really powerful examples of how staff at Share Our Strength have, I'd say, really leaned in and done the hard work to evolve and to center equity. And there is more work to do. There will always be more work to do. As I said, I think especially at our sort of the organizational wide strategy level, that's where I see great opportunity for us as a leadership team to really lean in as we move forward.
You know, as we engage with organizations all over the country of all types of sizes and missions, one thing that we are observing, despite the fact that many organizations got on their equity, diversity, and inclusion journeys around the time of the murder of George Floyd, we are seeing some fatigue. Organizations getting stuck in the education and not being able to evolve to kind of everyday practice. Do you have any advice? You've come from a very diverse background. You worked in the White House, you worked with the Obama Foundation, you were in healthcare, you've worked in a variety of settings and worked with a variety of leaders who perhaps were on their journeys earlier. Do you have any advice for CEOs or other leaders who maybe are stuck in education or stuck in assessment mode, but haven't been able to evolve to practice, or maybe are simply tired of the effort? Tough question, I know.
Well, the thing that I find essential to do this work in a really authentic way is to create space to ask the questions of, as we look at our mission and our vision as an organization, how are issues of equity centered in what it looks like to fulfill our mission? I think where it can be really hard and where there is sort of fatigue of hard work, and then there's fatigue of what is this all adding up to, right? Which are, I think, different things connected at times.
Yeah, and I would actually add the fatigue of discomfort.
Yes.
Which for many is just grueling all by itself, right?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. And so on that, the piece of what does this all add up to? I think it is really hard to do this work in a meaningful way as a CEO, as a leadership team, as a staff, if it's not clear how centering equity will allow you to better accomplish your mission. Otherwise, it feels like an add-on, right? It feels like we're doing this thing for X reason, right? Because we feel pressured, because it's exciting, because we care about it, right? But if it needs to be more than, I think it needs to be more than because we care about it. That's an essential ingredient. But we all need to understand, how is it essential? How is centering equity essential to our success as an organization in fulfilling our mission? And I think that a lot of organizations in 2020 probably didn't have the space to sort of ask those big questions, sort of move very quickly into action. And I would say that if it feels like we're having a hard time translating trainings and good intention and commitment into sort of truly living it within your organization, then you have to be making sure that you are aligned as a team and an understanding of how centering equity will be the thing that helps you ultimately achieve your mission, because then it becomes central to it. Yes. Right. And I don't,
and not ancillary. Yeah.
Right. And I'll say that is a journey that we are on at Share Our Strength. Right. And I don't think that's like an overnight, it all necessarily comes together. And so that's the other piece of it, and gets maybe to your point of exhaustion around discomfort, is this, to me, I think you have to think of this work as a lifelong journey, right? And there's tension in that, right? Because it can't be a lifelong journey and as a result, you don't feel urgency, right? Or we can take years and years to address that, right? It's sort of, how do you balance the urgency to take action, to make this a priority, with the understanding that, and this can be part of her like white savior complex, is this like, well, I got to tie it all up in a bow really quickly, right? I gotta have the answers. I have to have the solutions. And again, that's where I think part of the role for all of us, and especially for white leaders, is that comfort sitting in the discomfort and building that muscle and recognizing. And it can't just be, well, I'm sitting in the discomfort and I'm not moving anything forward. And right. So like, give me a pat on the back, but the understanding that the work of moving this forward will bring with it moments of discomfort. And we need to not just band-aid over that really quickly, right? We need to create space as leaders and space for our team to wrestle with those questions. And that is part of the journey of really moving it forward in an authentic way.
Do you have a prognosis for equity, diversity, and inclusion in your organization? What's your prognosis for the future? If you roll the clock forward, let's say we won't go too far, 2030. What does it look like for Share Our Strength?
So I would say that we will have built upon what is a strong history of, I think we are fortunate in that in many ways our mission sort of inherently centers a vision of equity. And we are in the midst of the work right now to re-articulate a mission and vision that does a few different things, including, I think, more clearly centering equity. And so what I see in 2030 is an organization and a team that feels very clear about what it means to center equity at Share Our Strength and how that is essential to our ability to fulfill our mission. So I see a team that feels that, right? I think probably right now we have a team that is deeply committed to this work and has taken a lot of action individually or as a department or as a team, and has seen examples of that also at the organization-wide level, but probably doesn't feel fully that this is the organization-wide strategy of how we will move this forward. And so what I see is in 2030, a team that will feel so proud of the organization's 40-year history and the examples time and time again where issues of equity have been prioritized, and a very clear sense of where we stand now, how the work we're doing moves us toward that ultimate vision, and our roadmap to end hunger and poverty ultimately at the end of the day.
Awesome. Let's shift gears to talk a little bit more about the role of the CEO in today's organization. I know the last few years have been fairly stressful for those of us who sit in this seat for all the reasons that we know exist. The pandemic, economic uncertainty, societal unrest, both here in the US and really around the world. And so I wonder if you might have any thoughts about what keeps CEOs up at night. What keeps you up at night, to be more specific? I know what keeps me up at night, but let's talk about you. What keeps you up at night as it relates to external factors that impact your organization that you may not have direct control over? Obviously, you're leading Share Our Strength, so you have some control over that ecosystem internally. But what keeps you up at night? And what are you struggling with as a CEO and being a CEO in this day and time?
Yes, well, I would point to a couple of things. I do think in terms of external factors, I mentioned that this is an internal factor, but connects to an external factor. So I mentioned that we're an organization that I'd say is going through a transformation. We're at an inflection point, and a transformation as we think more broadly about what it means to fulfill our mission, a transformation in terms of our workforce and how big our teams are and where they're based and what that means in terms of how we relate to each other, and a transformation in terms of funding. We were lucky to receive, as many nonprofits did, the pandemic brought out the charitable sides of a lot of folks, and we saw a real influx in funding. And we're able, because of that, to further our impact and think boldly as the team, was in a place of really having to throw out the playbook of sort of what their programmatic strategy was, to really working in partnership with communities to understand what their needs were and adjust accordingly. We have really been fortunate in that influx of investment that we saw from a large group of people. And the work now is, and obviously not alone in, as we see inflation and an economy that is evolving in and of itself, is as the world is at an inflection point, I would say, and there's a lot of transformation going on in a lot of external factors. How do you make big bets as an organization, right? How do you lead an organization forward and be aggressive and bold when it's hard to figure out what the world's
Tomorrow
going to
will look like.
Yeah, I was going to say in 2 years, but exactly tomorrow. I guess the point in that is like we are at such a moment of rapid transformation as a society. And even, I'll like AI, right? I like that just strikes me as like how that alone is, I'd say probably in a matter of like months ahead of us, going to transform how a lot of things happen and
in ways we
in
can't even imagine right now.
Right. Yeah. So I use that just as an example of leading an organization. I do think part of transformation is thinking big and bold, but also having a strong foundation and like having your footing beneath you. And I feel very good that we have that at Share a Strength. And as we look at these external factors that are evolving, it's a really interesting thing, I think, to sort of make some big bets on where you want to go when it feels like the external ground beneath us is constantly evolving. So I would say that. And then I would say what I alluded to earlier, which is I really believe that sort of the question of the time of our time for CEOs and organizational leaders is how do we evolve and support the flexibility for our staff that they want and I think deserve, and also support that individual flexibility in a way that does not lose that team camaraderie, right? That connection, yes, collaboration, but I do think there is a question of how you feel that deep connection to, on a daily basis, the mission of your organization and sort of like what makes what's the special sauce of your team and your group. And so to me, that keeps me up at night because, as I said, I think we are living those questions right now and trying out some different policies and again, working to create and support that flexibility for the team. As I said, the Share a Strength has a history of, I think, being out on the leading edge of that. And I'm thinking about what does it look like to be on the leading edge of that now in this phase of HR policy evolution in the broader workforce, and to do it in a way that people really feel tied and connected in a beautiful way to that sort of core of Share a Strength.
Yeah. I'm very encouraged by the upliftment of the issue of talent. And the fact that talent has been centered in today's organizations. It wasn't like that when I came into this space 30 years ago. I'm very encouraged to see it not only in large organizations like Share a Strength, but in the smallest of nonprofits and social impact organizations, recognizing and understanding the central nature of talent and its connection to mission and organizational success, right? Because you cannot have that unless you have some group of people powering the mission, whether it's volunteers, board members, or paid staff. It takes people to advance the mission. And so you're clearly living that, and that's a wonderful thing. And we encourage all CEOs who are struggling with what to do next to be sure that they kind of lift up and pull through talent in every kind of strategic initiative, because without doing so, it just doesn't work. The pandemic really brought that to the forefront. Employees continue to be kind of in charge in this moment. The economy has not fully shifted. It's leveling out, but it has not fully shifted to a point where employers are back calling all of the shots, right? There's still more jobs than we have talent. And so it's very encouraging to hear the work that you're doing at Share a Strength and the centralizing of talent with your strategy. That's really important. I wonder if you have any thoughts around kind of the new set of skills that CEOs need as they lead their organizations. There was a heavy focus on kind of technical competence back in the 80s, 90s, even 2000s. But that kind of potpourri of skills is changing for CEOs. Do you have any thoughts about that and what you believe makes up the successful nonprofit leader?
So we're on the same wavelength because as you were just talking about the excitement you feel in seeing the centering around employees and people policy and in a way that you didn't feel 30 years ago, I was also thinking about, and I think directly connected to that, an evolution that has occurred in perspectives of what leadership looks like, right? And I feel that in particular as a female leader. I was talking to some folks recently of, my, I'd say, real breakthrough moment as a leader at some point in my 20s was when I sort of settled into my authenticity. I'm a big believer in authentic leadership. And I feel like in my early 20s, I was sort of looking around at people that I deemed leaders or seemed to be professionally successful and felt like, oh, well, the thing they're really good at, like, I don't know if that's what I'm good at. And at first sort of felt like, so can I be the leader I hope to be? And where I started to really shine as a leader was when I settled into me, my authenticity as a human, and really starting to understand what were the things that were my great strengths and also what are the things that are my weaknesses, right? And that I could focus on developing, that I could own and just sort of be comfortable with, that I could identify leaders that I hire that maybe have those strengths that are not where my strengths exist. And so for me, that was sort of my moment of stepping into my power, was that sense of authenticity. And I think that the world is looking for more authentic leaders. And I would say a more sense of just connection to people, of empathy, of listening, of trying to marry a bold vision with the lived experience of those that you're working with, that those you're serving, a sense that you don't have all of the answers. And for me, in many ways, I think of leadership as sort of, being an instrument to be played, to see how all the pieces can fit together and work to make the conditions such that they can come together and that orchestra can, play the symphony. And to me, that is what leadership, true leadership is. That is how I think about the role that I play as a CEO. And I think that is a huge evolution. To the extent others agree with me, I don't think that is what leadership was always thought of, 50 years ago.
Definitely not. And you hit on something: empathy, vulnerability, authenticity. Those are things that we definitely see as helping kind of usher in this new era of leadership. And when you combine those elements, you foster a level of trust among the people who have committed time and talent, such that you have better results, right? Better retention, better employee experience, better quality of service that you deliver to the communities that you serve. Sounds like you're on your way to continuing an amazing legacy, and we thank you so much for your time today. I've thoroughly enjoyed the conversation and wish you all the best as you journey through your time at Share Our Strength. And again, thank you for being with us today.
Thank you so much, Lisa.
Well, that's all we have for today's episode. Thank you so much to Ann Filipic, CEO for Share Our Strength. Learn more about Share Our Strength online. Visit them at shareourstrength.org and learn more about Nonprofit HR. Visit us online at nonprofithr.com.